Hi, everyone. This is me, Dr. Stacy Betancourt, with another edition of Making Sense with Dr. Stacy. So, jumping right into it, last week I talked about anger as an emotion and what anger can do. And I talked about how there are certain triggers for certain people and overall what the feelings and emotions that anger can do to you. So, this week I want to talk about jealousy because those two emotions tend to run very closely together. Uh, in I'm going to kind of apply this to both divorce and non-divorce, a little bit like I did with anger, because you know what, these emotions can come up anytime in your life. You don't necessarily have to be going through a divorce to have these feelings. But looking at the idea of jealousy, jealousy is all about control. And that may be hard for some of us to accept, especially if you are someone who does have feelings of jealousy. Jealousy is an emotion that occurs when somebody does something that you don't like when they're very intimate with you or very close to you. Now, it could be breaking a an appointment. It could be not showing up and finding out later they did something with somebody else. It could be a spouse or a partner who is spending a lot of time with someone from the opposite sex in getting something from those people that you feel they should be getting from you, whether it be a social emotional attachment, a social emotional connection, whatever it can be. That feeling you get where it starts to rise and you start to feel that, like, why don't they want to do that with me? Or why don't they want to do what I want to do? And, why are they constantly contacting that other person when I'm right here? That is a feeling of jealousy. Now, jealousy as itself is fed by a couple of emotions. Not only is it control, like it or not, and that's hard for some people to accept, it is control. Because what's happening is that the other person is acting out of your control and you're not able to understand or conceive what's going on. So you're taking that as a rejection. So you get angry. And so there's that connection. And we talked about what anger can do. So when you're looking at the idea of jealousy and how that can be very damaging in a relationship, is that jealousy kind of holds together a couple of different emotions, not just the emotions, not of anger, not just the feeling of losing control, but there's also a guilt involved because you don't want to sound like that person who's, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why aren't you paying attention to me? How could you not show up? All of those things come into play. So it begins to swirl. Think about putting something in a blender and adding bananas and adding apples and adding some juice and adding whatever fruit and protein powder, and you mix it up and you can't find anything anymore. The bananas are separate, right? So it's kind of a funny analogy, but it bears truth in the fact that all of these emotions begin to spin in a sense because you're having a hard time processing them separately. And once they get mixed in together, there is no separating. You can't separate it. So the best thing to do in a situation like this is make sure that you do not speak with anger. Number one, take the anger, mentally picture that angry emotion and take it away. You have to. And then if it's a pattern, for example, you have a friend who every time you're together with this friend, no matter what it is you're doing, they're on their phone texting. They're not paying attention to you. You could be having dinner. You could be going shopping. You could be doing anything. It doesn't matter what you're doing together, but this person is not fully engaged in you because their phone is an extension of themselves. And you begin to build resentment for that phone to the point that sometimes I've known of people who've taken the phone out of the person's hand and thrown it, which is never a good thing. Talk about ruining a relationship in 2.5 seconds. The reality is that it does bear talking about. It's definitely worth talking about. The situation is how do you approach it? That matters. You do not want to be accusatory as going to them and saying, how can you do this? And why do you always do this? And, the second you use language like, why do you always do this? You have lost that person. That person has got their feelings of protection built up, and they are not willing to hear you at that moment. So the thing is that you've got to learn how to communicate. This goes back to an earlier episode of communication and learning how to talk to the other person so that one, you're not threatening. Two, you're not calling their morals and their practices into question and making them feel defensive. But it's worth talking about, because the longer you let those feelings go, then those feelings of resentment begin to grow. And the more that they grow in a jealousy situation, the more it's a disaster. And their chances of recovering are very slim. Pretty serious topic, but here's the thing. Learning how to look within inside yourself is probably one of the easiest things that you can do. When you feel those feelings of jealousy start to build, you have got to begin to ask yourself, why? Why am I feeling this way? Is it me or is it them? If the relationship is worth salvaging, if the relationship is worth being into, then you have got to do the hard work, and it needs to start with yourself. I'm not saying that you're necessarily guilty, but you've got to look at yourself. You have to look at, what is it from the relationship that you are seeking? What is it from the relationship that you enjoy most? Now, if you're married, I'm thinking that that relationship feeling should be love. Whatever love is to you, because love, there is no one way, right way, wrong way to love someone. I mean, yes, you can say there are some wrong ways to love each other, and jealousy is one of them. But what I'm talking about is in a general relationship, how do you define what is right and what is wrong? And in a marriage, there's so many aspects. Are there children involved? Are there children not involved? Do you have work expectations that truly take away from a relationship? There's so many different facets. I have had clients who are jealous over their spouse's career because that career takes them away from what they saw as a traditional family relationship. And those are conversations that need to be had before you get married. But if you're married and things change, then you both have to be willing to acknowledge the changes, to realize that it's not necessarily a bad thing, that it can actually enrich the relationship on so many different levels. But it takes sometimes those hard talks, and really voicing what you feel, but voicing what you feel in a way that's going to be productive. So, for example, it may sound fake, it may sound forced, but don't use those accusatory, like I just said, don't use. That could be accusatory, but it's using language as in I feel, because it's your feelings. I feel that sometimes while I would like to have more conversations with you, I notice that in the evenings, you enjoy being on your cell phone. Or I notice that it's, you're either playing baseball with your friends or you're going to baseball games regularly with your friends. Encourage those friendships, but at what point do you need your spouse or partner to be with you? Especially if they enjoy something that you don't. And that can help a relationship because, in the sense that both of you understand where you're coming from, both of you understand what you're willing to accept and what you're not willing to accept. And also understanding that in a relationship, it's okay to have free time away from each other. And there are some situations where that can make the relationship so much better because you can see things from fresh eyes. You can look at things in a way that you didn't anticipate. And understanding that your partner or spouse or good friend has a life that doesn't include you. And that's okay too. If your friend has a lot of different friends and they don't ask you to do things with that group, don't feel badly. If you want to join in, see if it's okay. If it's not, you have to accept that it may not be. For example, if there's something that they enjoy doing that's against your moral code, you cannot expect to be invited to something like that. So it's knowing the person, it's knowing yourself, it's looking at your negotiables, it's looking at your non-negotiables. But I will tell you, in that having feelings of jealousy, if you cannot separate those along with those feelings of anger and anguish and everything that goes with it, I'm encouraging you to talk to somebody, whether it be me or somebody else. It's important that you are able to truly to make yourself your best self is working through those things that bother you. And it may seem like this massive hill that you have to climb, but in actuality, it doesn't have to be that difficult. So what I want you to do this week is I want you to think about what I'm saying. I want you to consider what I'm offering and the idea that, it's okay. And learning that everyone has their own way of looking at things. Everybody has their own choices and everyone's on their own journey. And the beauty in that is that at times you intersect and it's a great connection. And there's other times that that's not going to happen, and that's okay. You've got to learn to be okay with yourself. You have to learn to be okay with the other person or the other people. You have to learn that there is a mutual respect. Now, if you're not feeling validated and respected in return, well, that's a little different. And that's a situation that you can't fix. So you have to determine whether the relationship is worth keeping or you're worth more and walking away. A lot of tough questions. So I want to encourage you to think about what I've said this week. Please keep the emails coming. You are welcome to email me through my website. You can post comments down below. I'm here for you. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything backing up on you, know that I'm here for you. I would love the opportunity to help. In the meantime, be good to yourself, be good to others, make good decisions for yourself. And remember, there are some things you can't control, like the thoughts and behaviors of others. So take care. Have a great week. This is Dr. Stacy Betancourt with Making Sense with Dr. Stacy, and I will see you next week.